historians are lying to you. Empires are not built by the loud proclamations of kings, but by the silent movements of an infrastructure that most people never see. This is not a story of a queen. It is the story of an imperial network, and the one person who understood its flow better than anyone else. That person was likely Atossa. Behind a veil, she was the human processor for the empire's bloodstream, the truth that the great men tried to hide.
Deep beneath the scorched sands of Persepolis, archaeologists unearthed the administrative shadow, the Persepolis Fortification Archive. These tens of thousands of clay tablets are forensic evidence of a superpower held together by a central hub. The records rarely name her directly, but they reveal a flow so precise that someone at the center had to be orchestrating it.
Most historians never saw her coming. She was the silent force behind the greatest empire the world had ever seen. And this is only the beginning. That person was likely Atossa, daughter of Cyrus, wife of Darius, mother of Xerxes. But those titles are just labels for now. Behind a veil, she was the human processor for the empire's bloodstream.
The network tracked rations for millions, and Atossa was uniquely positioned to see the whole picture. While kings carved their names into mountains, she ensured the reality of the state remained stable in the clay. If you watch this video to the end, you will witness the invisible scaffolding of civilization, the truth that the great men of history try to hide.
To understand the birth of an empire, you must stop staring blindly at the golden crown and start looking at the cold logistics of the grave. A dynasty is only as strong as the calculated infrastructure required to bury its creator. If you cannot feed the masons, your empire is nothing more than a myth. 530 BC, the world held its breath. Cyrus the Great was dead. Atossa stood in the dust of the Sargati, acting as the stabilizing anchor while the very ground of the state shifted. She watches the oxen straining under the immense weight of the blocks. She hears Hebrew and Babylonian stonemasons grumbling in a dozen tongues. She realizes that even a minor delay in grain delivery from the northern satrapies could trigger a riot that halts the tomb's construction for months.
The archive suggests the tomb required hundreds of oxen. Estimates indicate each animal consumed roughly 15 kilograms of fodder daily. To secure a year of labor, thousands of tons of feed had to be moved across the plateau. Even a small loss, just a few percent, could mean hundreds of animals dead and the blocks remaining in the quarry. This was the quantified risk of a divinity exposed as a logistical lie. The machine requires uninterrupted flow, and Atossa was the only operator who saw every single gear turning.
My father is a god to the people, but to the network, he is a movement of stone. Cambyses has the title, but he depends on a machine he does not yet understand. If I do not ensure the corn reaches the masons, our father's legacy will sit unfinished in the dust. Let's stop romanticizing marching armies. If you honestly think an army wins by sharp swords alone, you are entirely blind to the true weapon, the supply line. If the line breaks for just 24 hours, the swords disappear, soldiers starve, and empires collapse. Atossa knew this absolute truth, and it was here, in the brutal wastes of Egypt, that the system faced its first true stress test. She followed the expansion of the state's nervous system into Egypt, navigating a campaign plagued by severe information delays. She gazes up at the Great Pyramid. She hears the screams of the sacred Apis bull being mocked by her brother. She realizes that Cambyses' mental stability is fracturing like dry clay, creating a volatile risk the network cannot calculate.
The march to Egypt required tens of thousands of horses, moving hundreds of tons of feed every 20. For hours across the Sinai was a feat of raw coordination. Atossa managed the contracts with Phoenician sailors. thought to ensure the grain reached the coast. A delay of just a few days could cost thousands of cavalry, turning a conquest into a graveyard. To cross the desert, tens of thousands of water skins were required, carried by camels. Even a small leakage rate meant hundreds of skins gone. A catastrophic risk of dehydration that could annihilate an army before the battle even began.
He mocks their gods to feel tall. He doesn't realize that an empire is held by the illusion of order, not just the terror of the spear. If he breaks their spirit too deeply, the flow of taxes will stop. I am the one waiting for reports while he hunts for ghosts in Memphis. If I do not maintain the link to Susa, the empire will forget we exist before we can return. We buy their gods with our silver, so they do not see the administrative chains we are forging. If the Nabateans lose faith in us tonight, the dynasty dies by dawn. Traditional history books focus entirely on bloody assassinations. But what happens when an imposter hacks the state database? He doesn't just steal the crown, he deletes the entire revenue stream. In 522 BC, the Persian Empire faced the world's first systemic cyber attack, executed not with digital code, but with wet clay. Atossa, the central hub, watched the ledger crumble. In 522 BC, the imperial nervous system faced its greatest failure. Cambyses was dead, and an impostor wearing her brother's face sat on the throne. This Bardia attempted to hack the system by erasing taxes for 3 years. Atossa, the central hub, watched the ledger crumble. She sees the impostor's uncertain gaze during the feast. She hears the 7 noble families whispering of civil war. She calculates that without revenue, the eastern border garrisons will likely desert within months.
A garrison in the east required thousands of silver shekels monthly. The tax holiday created a massive deficit, likely running into millions. Atossa measured the risk in the estimated rate of desertion. If the loss of men reached a certain threshold, the empire would implode from within, regardless of who wore the crown. If the soldiers go unpaid, the spears turn inward, and the throne becomes a scaffold.
He thinks he buys time with the people's love, but he only sells our security. He is a ghost in my brother's skin, and he lacks the steel to maintain the machine. If I do not find a better manager, the network will break us all. Let's strip away the historical romance. A murderer needs an administrative office to provide legitimacy. When Darius drove his spear through the impostor, he realized the crown was worthless without the system's user credentials. He didn't just need a royal queen, he needed the central processor. Darius and his conspirators eventually broke into the bedchamber, but their success depended entirely on the network's acceptance. She sees the blood under Darius's nails as he takes her hand. She hears his heart beating fast behind his breastplate. She realizes this marriage is not an act of love, but a stabilizing contract written in blood.
To secure the throne, Darius needed the immediate support of the noble families. Estimates suggest he had to distribute thousands of gold derricks within 48 hours. Atossa likely orchestrated the movement of this gold through the palace's secret corridors. Without this liquidity, the nobles would have turned their spears on the palace. The annual tribute totaled thousands of silver talents, requiring hundreds of camels. Atossa optimized the routes to minimize losses, reducing transit risks significantly.
She watches Darius carving the propaganda at Behistun. She hears the sound of chisels forcing the mountain to lie. She realizes that this investment in stone will save years of civil war by terrifying the satraps into compliance. His hands are stained, but his mind is sharp. He is a builder, and I am the archive. We will weave a lie so magnificent that history will call it the only truth. I am the silence that holds his throne. Let the world believe his divinity. I know it is the silver I moved that keeps his God on the throne. If the gold stops moving today, the divinity vanishes tomorrow. I am the node that ensures the God remains alive. Forget the grand speeches and royal pageantry. While the kings were the loud face of the empire, the archive at Persepolis shows a nervous system functioning with the clinical, terrifying authority of a modern data-driven surveillance state. Atossa reviews reports of a missing courier in the Zagros Mountains. She hears the frantic excuses of the archive scribes. She realizes that without that courier's report, she cannot know if the Ionian unrest has turned into a full-scale revolt, forcing her to decide on troop movements under dangerous time pressure.
The archive reveals the Angarium, the first state postal system. The royal road stretched for thousands of kilometers, with relief horses at every station, allowing a message to travel hundreds of kilometers per day. If a horse lacked fodder in a distant province, the hub in Susa knew it within a week. It was a control apparatus that minimized rebellion reaction times significantly. Maintaining the royal road required over 100 stations, each keeping a 10% grain surplus to prevent delays. The textile workshops in Susa functioned as an industrial hub for the state's diplomatic needs, producing purple fabric as visual logistics to project imperial presence and reduce military costs. The database is our shield, and the reed stylus is more lethal than any bronze blade.
They think power is the sound of trumpets. It isn't. Power is the silence when an order is executed exactly as planned 1,000 miles away. But today, the silence is terrifying. The link is broken, and I am blind in the east. Information is the fastest weapon we have. Before a governor even considers revolt, I have the tablets detailing his grain shortage. I don't need to fight him. I just need to stop the deliveries. I starve out his ambition before he can draw a sword. I am the processor at the center. Every vibration in the web is a number I have already accounted for, a risk I have already mitigated. When the backbone of the state is threatened by human fragility, the narrative must become harder than the stone it's carved upon. If you want to survive the chaos of reality, you must look behind the curtain and control the numbers. Because when the flesh fails, only the invisible scaffolding remains standing. Herodotus records a growth in her breast, the first recorded case of cancer in history. It was a moment of vulnerability where the human behind the hub was exposed. She feels the sharp incision of the Greek physician. She hears his trembling breath. She realizes that her survival is worth a general's salary. But his total silence is worth even more to avoid showing any weakness to the network.
Systemet, during Xerxes' invasion of Greece, the army required hundreds of thousands of kilograms of grain daily. Atossa, nearly 70, remained in Susa as the stabilizing node. She calculated that if even one satrapy failed to pay its taxes while the army was away, the invasion would likely collapse within a week. She was the logistical anchor holding 20 nations in check. Her final reforms consolidated provincial tax collection, reducing embezzlement by a significant margin. This surplus funded the construction of the Apadana Hall's foundations, ensuring stability for centuries. The administrative system she fostered lasted for 200 years until Alexander the Great, maintaining over 90% administrative continuity because it was too efficient to replace.
My son is a poet who wanted to whip the sea, and now the sea has swallowed his fleet. I cannot fix his ships, but I can reframe the narrative. A defeat is only a reality if the people believe it. I will write the truth that saves the dynasty. They think Alexander conquered us. They don't realize he just became the new manager of my office. The records endure. Atossa's clay tablet is not a dead object. It is a direct mirror for you today. In a world of chaos, it is the one who counts, the one who has the discipline to see the raw logistics behind the grand dream, who ultimately wins. Empires were never built by proud kings alone. They were built by those who understood the invisible scaffolding, the ones who operated the database from the dark. If you want to look at the hidden ledger that truly builds the world and stop being lied to by traditional history, hit subscribe right now.